Sunrises, sunsets. Humans' busyness postponed. Nature has not changed. Good morning, everybody. Afternoon, evening, or whatever time you decide to do your learning. Today we're starting a series called Some Certain Forms. The poetry form we're going to learn about is the haiku. You will learn about what it is, how to write it, and look at a few examples of haiku poetry. Let's get into the lesson. All right, so let's talk about the haiku. The haiku is a short form of poetry with Japanese origin that has 5 syllables first, 7 syllables second, and 5 syllables last. That's right, just 3 lines. Even though you're stuck to these 3 lines and these 3 syllables, there's so much you can do with a haiku to make gorgeous, meaningful poetry. Thematically, haikus are Japanese. They reflect the seasons and use what's called the kigo word. Here, I wrote you a haiku to summarize all of that. Japanese haikus, reflections of the seasons, using the kigo. So the kigo word is essentially a word that cues the reader into what season the haiku is about. So often, the haiku won't come out and say, hey guys, it's autumn, or it's winter. There's not enough words for that. But there are key words that you can look at in each haiku to figure out what season they're talking about. We're going to look at 4 examples, one for each season. I'm going to identify some of the things I think are the kigo words in those haikus. Here's the first example. None is traveling here along this way but I, this autumn evening. All of these examples are from the Japanese poet Basho. This is a beautiful poem of autumn. This kigo word is really easy, right? It comes out and says that it's autumn evening. Now, when we think about haikus, they're often a representation of some sort of journey, often a journey of life. If we think about the seasons as representative of life in itself, autumn is towards the end of a life. Autumn is when you might be walking alone, when you're old, when people have forgotten you, when you're old enough to go your own path. Autumn is the age of maturity. Here in this poem, none is traveling here along this way but I, this autumn evening. You can clearly tell those ideas of independence, of maturity, of a waning of a life. In the waning of a life, then we move into winter. Winter is often thought of as the death of life, or the death of the earth. Everything is blanketed in snow. Trees die, plants go dormant, animals hibernate. Just like it is the death of the earth, snow and winter is often representative of the death of a life. So here, this snowy morning, that black crow I hate so much, but he's beautiful. Our kigo word is the word snowy. This keys us in that we're talking about winter. The black crow is often representative of death. This is about an ending, but also a beginning. You've probably heard the phrase that endings can be bittersweet. This haiku represents that perfectly. The end is something we hate so much, and yet it's beautiful. The murderous crow, the black crow represented in this poem, represents death. If you didn't know, a group of crows is called a murder. So here, this poem is talking about the ending of a life, or the ending of something. This next poem gets a little bit brighter. Spring is about rebirth, about youth, about new life. Here we have Under cherry trees, soup, the salad, fish and all, seasoned with petals. Does anybody know what's happening in this short poem? They're having a picnic. This is probably a young couple picnicking under the cherry trees. And because it's probably a young couple, we can guess romance, new life, maybe even marriage. This is celebratory. So we have a couple options for Kigo words here. First, the cherry trees. Now, cherry trees exist all year round, but they're really at their prime in the spring, right? So that word can let us know that we might be in springtime. But it really solidifies with the word petals, because we know that not only are there cherry trees there, but there are cherry trees in bloom. This is a perfect example of a way that a haiku subtly hints at a season and really can tell us a whole story in just a few simple words. The final haiku, which, since we've talked about fall, winter, and spring, you could probably guess is about summer, has this beautiful butterfly imagery. So here, wake, the sky is light. Let us to the road again, companion butterfly. When we think about summer, if spring is a time of rebirth, summer is the time for youth. It is the time for joy, for making mistakes, for staying out all night and having so much fun. This poem kind of embodies that. The sky is light, life is happy, we're going out on this journey again. And then we have this companion butterfly. Now, butterfly is probably our Kigo word here. Most often, butterflies are really prominent in the summertime. So this keys us in that we're talking about summer. Also, the sky is light probably tells us that as well. Most places in the world, the sky stays light for the longest period of time in the summer. The butterfly often represents new life, rebirth, and happiness, kind of like springtime does. So this is a combination of that youthfulness and that excitement, that vigor for life. Such a beautiful poem. But again, so short. The haiku challenges us to figure out how to compress many ideas into few words. And it can be such a fun challenge. Basho is a really famous Japanese haiku writer. So on the left-hand side, we have the Japanese, and I don't speak that well, so I'm not going to read it to you. But on the right-hand side, we have one of the many, many translations of this poem. This is probably one of the most famous haikus written. It says, "The old pond is still. A frog leaps right into it, splashing the water." The reason it's so famous is it kind of embodies that entire life journey that we just talked about in 4 poems in one. So we start with an old pond, something that is experiencing the winter of life. A frog, something youthful, something living, something moving, jumps right into it and splashes. What happens when you splash in a still pond? There are ripples, there are changes, there are effects to it. So this poem represents old, death, dying, rebirth, youthfulness, and change, all in the same 3 lines. It's really interesting to look at how these nature images can make us think about our own lives and the way that we experience them. Now that you've learned about how to write a haiku with 5 syllables first, 7 syllables second, and 5 syllables last, and you learned about some of the themes of haikus, themes that have to do with nature and with the journey of life, I want to encourage you to write some haikus. Before you get started, I encourage you to write down a list of kigo or season words. Think about your own life, your own area. What do you associate with spring, with summer, with autumn, winter? Generating this list of words will get you started thinking about how you could write your own journey in a series of haikus.